Hey everyone, and welcome back to the ATD Movie Channel. I'm Tony, and today I'll be reviewing Rampage, the latest arcade game adaptation starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Let's jump right into it. So I'm obviously a couple weeks late with this review because I've been sick and we were on vacation, but I had to see this movie. Not only because fans are loving it and it's putting up big numbers at the box office, but because I love Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And that'll lead right into my first like about the film. The movie is obviously an adaptation of the old arcade game Rampage, where there is a mutant gorilla, wolf, and crocodile, alligator, not sure which one, and they take over the city. And in the game, it really kind of flipped it on us as a kid, because we were able to play as the monsters. We weren't the good guys defeating the monsters. We got to play as the monsters. And so I remember going to Chuck E. Cheese in my old town of Chico and playing the arcade game. And it was one of my favorites, not just because it was visually fun and the mechanics were different, but because I remember it was pretty easy to learn and master. I still remember it till this day. I'm digress because I want to talk about The Rock. And not only is the concept of the video game adaptation appealing to me, but Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is quickly becoming one of the best actors, action heroes in Hollywood in general, and he's really great in this movie. He is very sincere in his performance, specifically with his relationship with the gorilla George. I think that relationship really plays out beautifully throughout the film, but primarily in the first act when they're setting up the world and we get to know these characters and we're introduced to them for the first time. That's when The Rock really hooks us. Also in the movie is Naomie Harris, Academy Award nominee Naomie Harris, who you might remember from Moonlight last year or the year before, and she's really great in the movie. And it would have been a lesser actress probably couldn't have handled this role. She plays a scientist, and she's thrown into the mix with all this action. And I know that that's a pretty popular trope in these kinds of movies, is to throw a scientist into the action. But she pulls it off, and I think it's because she's such a good actress that she can do this. It doesn't hurt that she was in 2 of the James Bond movies, Skyfall and Spectre. But she's good. She's really good in this movie. And the other person I want to talk about is Jeffrey Dean Morgan, he plays sort of like a old school cowboy, police, cop, and he does really good. And the banter between him and The Rock is pretty cool, because not only do they have contrasting looks and styles, but they just find a way to like almost play a tennis match of talking smack to each other throughout the movie. And I felt like it worked. I liked it. I enjoyed watching the two of them on screen at the same time. So kudos to the filmmakers for giving us human characters that we cared about and want to see what happens. I also really like the monsters in this movie, both from an aesthetic character design, but from a cinematic storytelling perspective as well. The relationship with George, I only briefly touched on it, is really, really good. And it does kind of harken back to Rise of the Planet of the Apes with James Franco and the Caesar character, but it's different. It's different enough to where we could kind of let that movie go, put it aside, and kind of buy in and suspend our disbelief. I also really love the character design of the wolf. I think it's fantastic. It's a shame that they gave away as much in the trailer as they did, because now we know that the wolf can glide, and they use it sparingly, but they use it effectively in the film, and I really like it. I like what they did. And then, God, I can't remember if it's a crocodile or an alligator. It's probably my least favorite of the 3, but still very effective. It looks cool. It's very intimidating. The just sheer size of these monsters is scary enough, but when they get zoom in and they do their close-ups, it's really frightening teeth and spikes and different ways of these animals to kill human beings that I thought was really effective. Kudos to the filmmakers on the special effects and the monsters themselves. And I think in conjunction with talking about the special effects, I want to talk about the spectacle as a whole. The city, the battle in the city that you see in the trailer is just incredible. Chicago is one of my favorite cities in America, and it was kind of fun to watch this movie and go, oh, I've been there, or I've seen that, or we walked right down that street. And it was kind of fun for us to be able to see the movie and compare some of the places that we've been lucky enough to visit. The way that the cinematographer handles the battle in the city is really great. It's different, and it introduces angles and shots that you're not used to seeing. It would have been really easy to do the Peter Jackson King Kong thing, where he's, in a distance showing the Empire State Building. But the director and cinematographer don't do that. They get in the action, they're in the monsters' faces, they're in the human characters' faces, and it looks spectacular. And I also want to talk about the way that they use the monsters both together and against each other. It's really cool, and there's so many money shots in this movie, it's hard to keep track. The visual effects look really, really sharp. I was paying attention to the animation because it relies so heavily on CGI that I was putting it under a microscope, and it delivers, guys. There's a lot of CGI in this movie, but it's some of the best that I've seen in a long time. There's a couple of wide shots where you see the three monsters creeping up a building or something like that, and it starts to lose you for a second. But overall, the CGI in this movie is top notch. And I mentioned that I loved the arcade game back home. I want to just say one of the other likes about this film is how loyal it is to the video game. I noticed something as small a detail as the tank design that they use for the military in this movie resembles the video game, and how in the video game the tanks are shooting from the ground level up at the monsters, and the way that the movie handles it is just great. And I just want to take 2 seconds in talking about how the movie stays loyal to the game. Late last year, The Rock starred in Jumanji: Return to the Jungle, and I made a comment in that review that movie might be the best video game movie that we've ever got. This is going to be a close second. It might compete for the top spot because it's just interesting and ironic that it stars the Rock as well. But very loyal to the arcade game aesthetically, and just the way that they interact with the city and the other human characters. And the last thing I want to talk about that I liked about the movie related to the interaction between the monsters and the humans is the story. I think it's an effective story, and I think they wrote something that gave us a reason to get to the final battle. Most of the times when we're seeing these kinds of movies, we're just waiting for the climax, and there's a silly story written and whipped up really quickly to kind of get everybody in the same place at the same time. I felt like this was effective. This resembled to me the first Transformers movie, where the human characters were just as important as the monsters, or in that movie, the Transformers. I think this did a really great job of meshing everything together, and the way that they incorporate action with the humans versus the CGI characters on a grander scale. Thumbs up. I mean, if you can't tell already, I really, really like this movie. Okay, so I like the movie, but it's not perfect. And I want to talk about the dialogue. Oh my God, you guys. The dialogue in this film is awful. And I would have thought that The Rock had enough clout in Hollywood by now to be able to read that script on set and go, no, I'm not going to say that. But there's a couple of those moments where you're just scratching your head. And I almost anticipated The Rock to kind of say something silly and then, raise an eyebrow and say a snarky remark instead. But no, the cheesy, awful dialogue stays, and he continues on with the scene. Another thing that I despised, and I mean despised, is Malin Ackerman as the villain. I like her, you guys. I think she's a great actress, and she's very versatile. She can do comedy, she can do drama. She's in Couples Retreat, which is a movie my wife and I watch several times a year, but she's really bad in this movie, and I don't think it's her fault. I truly believe it's miscasting. She should have never been cast as a villain or a sinister, deadly villain. I just don't buy it. And with every line of dialogue and with every action beat that she's involved with, it just spirals out of control for me personally. Couldn't suspend my disbelief anymore. It was awful. She's miscast, and luckily she's not a huge part of the movie, so it didn't ruin the experience for me. And then the last thing I didn't enjoy about the film was the music. And I don't always talk about the score in a bad way. I usually, if I do a review, I talk about how I enjoyed it or it fit. this was kind of offbeat, and I was really kind of listening specifically towards the second and the third act, and there were moments where the music was really flat when it should have been heightening the energy to match the action, and there was other times where it almost gave a comedic approach to a very serious conversation and dialogue. So it was really offbeat and off kilter. I didn't enjoy it, and I thought that it could have been much better than what it was. So overall, I really liked the movie. I love Dwayne The Rock Johnson. I love the monsters in this film. I hope they find a way to make a sequel without it being too ridiculous as Three Monsters Attacking Chicago is. But for me personally, I liked it. I think that it's a great summer action popcorn flick that will entertain and kind of get you to unwind for 2 hours and just enjoy the spectacle of it all. So, have you seen Rampage? Have you seen any other video game adaptations you like? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be notified of content uploaded regularly. You can find other movie reviews on the channel as well. Thanks for watching my review of Rampage. I'll talk to you soon.